Ranking the characters in Final Fantasy IV is kind of an impossible task given the game's structure, since you only have access to specific characters at specific points outside of the PSP remake. In addition to meaning that the party members are never really competing with each other, it raises a bunch of weird questions. Like, how much is a character being strong just a result of their section of the game being earlier? Palom and Porom are definitely a highlight of this, as they face off against much weaker enemies than someone like Edge or Fusoya. Conversely, the characters who are around later reach a higher level, so do we give them credit for the higher level spells as a result of that? Or do we look at the hypotheticals? Palom would get Quake at a much earlier level than Rydia, which in theory probably makes him a better Black Mage, but realistically, he's not in the party long enough to get to that level reasonably. So do we just discard his later spell list? It's for this reason that it's taken me so long to make the FF4 ranking video. I considered simply ranking them as characters and how much I like them, but then that runs into a different problem. A lot of the characters are pretty one-dimensional. Sure, people like Edward and Cecil get fleshed out, but then you've also got, well, Palom and Porom, who are pretty cool and I do like them, but there's just not that much going on. As a result, I ultimately decided to rank these goobers via gameplay. But don't take this ranking too seriously. If you disagree with my ordering or whatnot, then it's probably because we're approaching this impossible task from different angles. Although, I doubt anyone will disagree with my choice for last place. Edward is pretty deliberately designed to be bad. One of his commands is just to hide and remove himself from battle. I love this guy as a character, but part of his good characterization is the fact that he sucks in combat. So he was obviously always going to be last place in the unit ranking. Right above him, I have Sid, who kinda just doesn't really do anything worthwhile. He's only in your party for a pretty short portion of the game, but during that time he fails to make an impression. He's a physical attacker at a time that you already have Cecil and Yang, both of whom are going to fulfill his role better than him. Technically, he can scan enemies for weaknesses as well, but I don't find that feature to be particularly worthwhile. And if I did, I could use the next weakest party member, Tella. Tella's main issue is his MP is abysmally low. Much like Edward, this serves a story purpose. Tella isn't supposed to be the best combatant out there, despite his wisdom and age. Or, in fact, because of his age, he's not really able to cast as well as he used to. Still, it's a pretty big limitation, and means that oftentimes he's whacking stuff with a staff for double-digit damage, which is just not doing it for me. Although Tella's not the only mage who I find disappointing, as Fusoya, the final party member to join you, is similarly underwhelming. In theory, he should be good. He uses white and black magic and doesn't have the MP problems that Tella does, but he faces an entirely different issue. He is super squishy. And since he joins in the endgame, I find that more often than not, Fusoya is just a puddle on the ground as opposed to an actual party member. Sure, when he's alive, he can contribute about as much as everyone else, maybe a little bit more than Edge, but none of the other party members have as much trouble staying alive as Fusoya does, so for that reason, I rank him pretty low. Although, speaking of Edge, he is going to be the lowest rated of our final party members, as I find he really just doesn't help as much as I would like. In theory, he's supposed to be faster, so he gets more actions and can fire off weaker attacks at a higher frequency, plus sometimes take breaks to help out with items or ninjutsu. But in practice, at least for me, his speed difference was not enough to really give him more opportunities to act than the rest of my party. Instead, he just got to act first. And when his attacks are that much weaker as compared to others and the steals are virtually useless, he kind of just feels in a similar vein to Sid as your third best physical attacker, in a game where being a physical attacker isn't such a valuable role that you desperately want 3, outside of maybe the final boss. Ninjutsu can be useful for certain situations though, so that's what elevates him above the rest of these stinkers. Up next, we've got Porum, who isn't actually particularly bad, she's just not around very long. But Porum, as your only healer during the Mount Ordeals section of the game, does prove her worth. And she can use white magic to damage the undead enemies that you will face in pretty great spades. Ultimately, I don't have much to say about her. White mage out of 10. And on that same topic, Palom is black mage out of 10, as he's around for the exact same portions of the game as Porum, but I find black magic to be marginally more useful than white magic. Realistically, you want both, but if I had to choose only one of these twins, I would pick Palom every day of the week. That being said, I'm sure he gets better in the PlayStation version, where he's just the de facto best dark mage to bring into the final dungeon, but since I'm judging based off of the SNES and Pixel remaster, I'm gonna go ahead and plop him here around the middle of the pack. Also in the middle of the pack is Yang, who is just a pretty good physical attacker with access to kick for niche situations where you want to hit everyone. Focus is also a pretty cool and oftentimes useful skill, but it is functionally just a worse version of Jump, which is why I have him underneath Kain. And, as you probably guessed, Kain is up next. He's very similar to Yang in just being another physical attacker who does some pretty good damage with Jump instead of Focus. Ultimately, I'm never unhappy with what he does for me, but I also don't find it to be as impressive as the top tier party members. On that topic, let's move on to our best 3. In third place, I have Rydia, who I'm penalizing a little bit for being functionally useless during the final boss fight, as she takes up a slot that could have gone to a better party member who didn't have to deal with all the counters to offensive magic. Still, as your premier damage dealing mage throughout the majority of the campaign, Rydia is quite useful. And in the early game, she can even help out a little bit with white magic. Although for late game white magic, you're going to have to turn to Rosa, who I have as the second best unit in the game. While I do think white magic is a little bit worse than black magic, the reason I have Rosa above Rydia is her buffing capabilities are supreme, and very much appreciated in the final boss fight. I also think that Rosa can do decent damage with aim on turns where you don't really need white magic to supplement the rest of your characters, which elevates her above the other mages for that reason. And shocking absolutely no one, Cecil is my pick for the best unit in the game. He just has everything you want. He deals pretty good damage, is the tankiest character in your party at all points, and can use white magic to supplement his tanking and attacking capabilities, while also guarding anyone who's at low HP to protect them from dying. He just does everything you care about. This is, of course, only factoring in Paladin Cecil. Dark Knight Cecil doesn't really do much for you, but that's the very start of the game, and by the time you actually care about doing something more than clicking the attack button, Cecil is capable of doing more than clicking the attack button. So that's why he is my pick for the strongest character in Final Fantasy V. It's kind of convenient, therefore, that he's also the only character around the entire campaign, so you never miss his awesome strength. Anyway, be sure to tell me in the comments why I'm wrong and what your rankings are. If you have Edward as the strongest character ever, then I salute you.